The princess left for dead. Dark clouds swirled over the lawless planet of Pharos 9, casting long shadows across the ruined city below. The air smelled of rust and burning metal. The streets were filled with criminals, scavengers, and bounty hunters, all looking for their next prey. A small broken escape pod lay smoking in the middle of a deserted alley. The metal was twisted and burned, the insignia of the imperial house of Sarah barely visible on its side. From inside, a weak figure crawled out, her silver hair matted with blood and dirt. Princess Zyra, the last heir to the Seltharian Empire, gasped for breath. Her body ached, her vision blurred, but she forced herself to move. She had barely survived the attack. Her own people had betrayed her, leaving her to die in the void of space. Somehow, she had managed to escape, but now she was stranded on a planet where no one would dare help her. Her once golden armor was cracked, her royal cape torn. She pressed a hand to her side. Her wound was deep, but she couldn't stop now. If she collapsed here, she was as good as dead. She staggered forward, limping through the dark alley. Her glowing violet eyes darted around. The city was alive with activity. Neon lights flickered. Strange alien creatures whispered in hushed tones. Merchants sold stolen goods under makeshift tents. But no one looked at her. They knew who she was, and they knew helping her meant death. The Empire's bounty hunters were already searching for her. She was a fugitive, a target. A group of 3 reptilian thugs stood outside a rusted bar, watching her stumble past. One of them, a tall alien with green scales and yellow eyes, nudged his companion. "That's her," he hissed in his native tongue. "The runaway princess." His companion grinned, showing sharp teeth. "Dead or alive, she's worth a fortune." Zyra heard them. She forced herself to move faster, ignoring the pain. Her legs felt like lead, her strength fading, but she had to keep going. The city lights blurred around her. Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Suddenly, she tripped over a loose piece of metal, falling hard against the cold ground. She groaned, trying to push herself up, but her body refused to obey. Her vision darkened. She could feel the thugs approaching. Footsteps. Closer. Closer. She clenched her fists, preparing to fight, but she had no energy left. This was it. Then a shadow fell over her. A tall figure stood in front of her, blocking the thug's path. He wore a dark, worn-out jacket, combat boots covered in dust, and a belt filled with weapons. A heavy blaster rested at his hip. His face was rugged, his eyes cold and calculating. A human. The thugs stopped. They didn't want trouble, not with a mercenary. "Move along, human. This doesn't concern you," the tallest reptilian growled. The man didn't answer right away. He glanced down at Zyra. Her breathing was shallow, her body weak, but her eyes still held fire. Something about her reminded him of the past, of battles fought, of comrades lost. He sighed. "She looks half dead already. Doesn't seem like she's worth much trouble." The thug smirked. "Exactly. So walk away." The human exhaled, shaking his head. "I could." A pause. Then, in one swift motion, he drew his blaster and fired. A single shot hit the ground between the thug's feet. The creatures hissed, stepping back in alarm. The human's voice was low and firm. "But I won't." The reptilians exchanged nervous glances. A fight with a mercenary wasn't worth the risk. With a final glare, they slinked back into the darkness. The human turned his attention back to the fallen princess. She was still conscious, barely. Her eyes met his, filled with suspicion and exhaustion. "Why? Help me," she whispered, her voice weak. The human crouched beside her, offering a gloved hand. "I don't know yet." For a moment, she hesitated. Then, slowly, she reached for his hand. As he pulled her up, he muttered to himself, "Guess I'm about to find out." The human who stepped in. A dull ache throbbed in Zyra's head as her vision swam. She felt the rough grip of the human's gloved hand as he pulled her up, her legs barely supporting her weight. The neon glow of the city blurred behind him, casting long shadows across his rugged face. She had heard stories of humans, reckless, unpredictable, and dangerous. Yet in this moment, he was the only one standing between her and certain death. He let out a tired sigh. "You're heavier than you look, princess." Zyra scowled, trying to pull away, but her legs betrayed her. The human caught her before she collapsed again. "Easy now," he muttered. "Let's get you out of here before those thugs change their minds." She didn't argue. She had no strength left to fight him, or her fate. A dangerous city. The streets of Veros 9 were a predator's paradise. From the towering slums to the underground tunnels, everyone was either a hunter or prey. Zyra had been taught that the Seltharian Empire controlled most of the galaxy. But here, the Empire was just a rumor. The human guided her through the winding alleys, his pace swift but cautious. Every few steps, his hand twitched near his blaster. She noticed the way his eyes flicked toward every shadow, every rooftop, every passing stranger. A warrior, a survivor. She swallowed. "Who are you?" He didn't look at her. Ethan Voss. The name meant nothing to her. He was just another mercenary, a man with no allegiance. "You shouldn't have helped me," she said. "I know." "Then why?" He stopped, turned to her. His gaze was unreadable. "Because I hate seeing people thrown away." Before she could respond, the alley exploded. The first chase. A blast of energy ripped through the wall beside them, sending debris flying. Ethan reacted instantly, grabbing Zyra and pulling her behind cover. "They're fast," he muttered. "Figures." A squad of bounty hunters rushed into the alley, their armor gleaming under the flickering streetlights. The leader, a cybernetically enhanced bounty killer, scanned the darkness with glowing red eyes. "Target acquired," the mechanical voice announced. "Princess Zyra. Surrender or be terminated." Zyra gritted her teeth. "So soon?" Ethan smirked. "Yeah, that's not happening." He fired first, taking out one of the bounty hunters before they could react. The alley erupted into chaos. Blaster fire, smoke, the crackle of energy weapons. Zyra ducked behind a broken hovercar, her breath ragged. She wasn't helpless. She had trained for battle. But she had no weapon, no energy left. Ethan moved like a ghost in the shadows, his blaster firing with deadly precision. He took out another attacker, then grabbed her wrist. "Move." A desperate escape. They ran through the maze-like city, twisting through tunnels and abandoned buildings as bounty hunters pursued them. Ethan led the way, his knowledge of the city evident in every sharp turn, every hidden path. But their pursuers were relentless. Zyra felt her strength fading. The wound in her side burned, and her legs felt like lead. She stumbled. Ethan caught her. "We're almost there. Just hold on." They reached a towering metal structure, a rusted industrial elevator leading to the undercity. Ethan slammed his fist against the controls. "Nothing. It's locked." Zyra panted. Ethan cursed. They must have shut it down. The bounty hunters closed in. Red laser sights flickered across their bodies. "No escape," the mechanical leader declared. Zyra's heart pounded. Was this it? After everything, was this the end? Ethan took a deep breath. Then he smiled. "Hope you're not afraid of heights." Before she could question him, he grabbed her and jumped. They plummeted into the darkness below. End of part 2. This part adds high stakes, fast-paced action, and a deepening connection between Zyra and Ethan, while keeping it unique and gripping. Let me know if you want any changes or enhancements before we continue to the next part. The hunt begins. The world rushed past in a blur of neon and shadow. Wind roared in Zyra's ears as she plummeted alongside Ethan, the cold air whipping against her skin. The undercity of Veros 9 was a labyrinth of metal beams, rusted platforms, and gravity-defying walkways. One wrong move, and they would be splattered across the ground below. Ethan reached out mid-fall, grabbing a thick cable with one hand and Syra with the other. Their momentum jerked violently, the force nearly tearing her from his grip. Pain shot through her arm, but she bit her tongue. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of hearing her yelp. Ethan grunted, adjusting his grip. Yeah, bad idea. Should have thought that through. Zyra scowled. You think? Before she could argue further, blaster shots whizzed past them. The bounty hunters hadn't given up. They stood above, aiming down at the two figures dangling in midair. Ethan swung them toward a rusted bridge, kicking off the wall with practiced ease. They crashed onto the platform, rolling to a stop. Zyra groaned, clutching her aching ribs. Ethan stood first, already scanning for an escape. The bounty hunters were relentless. They had likely set up checkpoints across the city by now. Zyra wiped blood from her lip. They won't stop hunting me. Ethan gave her a sideways glance. Yeah, I noticed. She hesitated, watching the human closely. Why was he still here? He could have walked away. He had no reason to fight her battles. And yet he had. The bounty hunters above shouted orders. More shadows moved along the walkways. Ethan exhaled sharply, rubbing his jaw. Right. Time to disappear. A city that never sleeps. The Undercity was nothing like the surface. Here, neon lights flickered over old tech, and illegal markets operated in plain sight. The streets were dense with smugglers, cyber hackers, and mercenaries looking for work. Zyra pulled up her hood, keeping her head low. The pain in her side hadn't faded, but she forced herself to move, keeping pace with Ethan. He led her through the winding alleys, past flickering holo signs that advertised black market weapons, illegal ship parts, and body modifications. She narrowed her eyes at him. You know this place too well. He didn't deny it. Been here before. A large alien merchant blocked their path, his reptilian eyes narrowing. You, human. His voice was thick with suspicion. That girl with you. She's the one with the bounty, isn't she? Ethan didn't blink. No idea what you're talking about. The merchant let out a low, rumbling laugh. Lies. You should turn her in before someone else does. She's not worth dying over. Zyra felt her pulse quicken. Her hand twitched toward a discarded metal pipe. She was ready to fight if she had to. But Ethan, he simply smiled. Maybe. But I like doing stupid things. Before the merchant could respond, Ethan grabbed Zyra's wrist and pulled her forward. The two vanished into the crowd before anyone else could take interest. A hidden refuge. Ethan led her to a hidden passage behind a repair shop, its metal doors rusted and old. Inside was a dimly lit underground bunker, lined with weapons, supplies, and an old cot pushed against the wall. A single, flickering light buzzed overhead. Zyra looked around, unimpressed. This is where you live. Ethan shrugged, tossing his blaster onto a table. Sometimes. It's off the grid. No trackers, no records. You'll be safe here, for now. She leaned against the wall, exhaustion weighing on her. Safe. The word felt meaningless. She met Ethan's gaze. You don't even know who I am. Why risk everything for me? For the first time, his expression darkened. Because I know what it's like to be left behind. His voice was quiet, but it carried weight. Zyra hesitated. There was something in his tone, something raw. This man, this human, had scars of his own. She looked away. Well, you should have left me. Because now you're in the middle of something much bigger. Ethan crossed his arms. I figured. A long pause. Then a loud beep echoed through the bunker. Ethan tensed. Someone had found them. Zyra reached for a weapon, ignoring the pain in her ribs. Looks like I won't be getting much rest. Ethan loaded his blaster, his smirk returning. Welcome to my world, princess. The first attack. The soft hum of the bunker's power core filled the room, but it couldn't mask the sharp beep of the motion sensors. Ethan's jaw clenched. Someone was outside. Zyra tightened her grip on the rusted metal pipe she had picked up earlier. It wasn't much, but she wasn't about to go down without a fight. Her body still ached, her wounds still throbbed, but she pushed the pain aside. Survival came first. Ethan moved toward a panel on the wall, pressing a button. A holographic display flickered to life, showing 4 figures moving in the alley outside. He sighed. That didn't take long. Zyra's eyes narrowed. Bounty hunters. Ethan tilted his head. Not just any. These guys work fast. Someone big must really want you dead. Zyra swallowed. Of course they did. She wasn't just a fugitive. She was the last living heir to the Seltharian Empire. If she survived, the ones who stole the throne would never be safe. A metallic clang echoed through the bunker. The intruders were cutting through the entrance. Ethan exhaled slowly. All right, princess. You good to fight. Zyra straightened, her violet eyes flashing with determination. Always. Ethan smirked. That's what I like to hear. Breaching the bunker. The metal door gave way with a violent shriek, sparks flying as a hulking alien bounty hunter stepped inside. His 4 arms carried an assortment of deadly weapons. His skin was thick like armor, his glowing red cybernetic eyes scanning the bunker. Behind him, 3 more bounty hunters followed, their weapons drawn and ready. The leader's voice came through his mechanical mask. Princess Zyra, you have one chance to surrender. Zyra rolled her shoulders, despite the pain. And if I don't? The bounty hunter tilted his head. Then we take you in pieces. Ethan shot first. A precise blaster bolt struck one of the hunters in the chest, sending him crashing backward into the wall. The bunker erupted into chaos. The leader lunged at Zyra with a vibro blade, but she dodged at the last second, her reflexes still sharp. She grabbed a metal bar from the table and swung it hard, smashing it against the side of his head. It barely staggered him. The alien turned, rage burning in his artificial eyes. He swung a massive fist, but Zyra ducked, rolling out of the way as Ethan fired another shot, forcing him back. Another bounty hunter charged Ethan, a plasma dagger flashing toward his throat. Ethan caught the attacker's wrist mid-strike, twisted it, and drove his knee into the alien's gut, sending him sprawling. Zyra barely had time to catch her breath before another hunter grabbed her from behind. A thick arm wrapped around her throat, choking the air from her lungs. She reacted on instinct. Her elbow drove back, striking the alien in the ribs. She twisted, grabbed the dagger from his belt, and slammed it into his leg. The bounty hunter roared in pain, releasing her. Ethan grabbed a grenade from his belt and tossed it toward the remaining 2 hunters. Time to go. He grabbed Zyra by the wrist, yanking her toward the back exit just as the grenade detonated, sending shockwaves through the bunker. The chase through the Undercity. They burst into the streets, their feet pounding against the wet pavement. Behind them, the remaining bounty hunters recovered quickly, their shouts echoing through the alleyways. Ethan led her through the narrow back streets, twisting and turning through the maze of neon-lit corridors. The Undercity was alive. Smugglers, merchants, and cyber-enhanced criminals barely spared them a glance as they fled past. A warning shot sizzled past Zyra's head, scorching the wall beside her. She cursed under her breath. Ethan pulled her into a dark passageway, pressing them both against the wall as the bounty hunters rushed past, unaware of their hiding spot. Zyra's breathing was heavy, her heart pounding. She turned to Ethan. "You're insane." Ethan grinned. "Took you this long to figure that out." A few moments passed. The bounty hunters had lost their trail, for now. Ethan exhaled, rubbing his temple. "We need to get off this planet. Fast." Zyra wiped sweat from her forehead. "Agreed. But we need a ship." Ethan thought for a moment, then nodded. "I know a guy. A new plan, a new problem." Zyra gave him a skeptical look. "Can we trust him?" Ethan shrugged. "Not even a little, but he owes me." Zyra didn't love that answer, but they were out of options. As they disappeared into the depths of the Undercity, neither of them noticed the tiny surveillance drone hovering above, its lens glowing as it recorded everything. Miles away, in a distant control room, a figure watched the footage. A cold, mechanical voice echoed through the chamber. "Found you." The truth revealed. Ethan led Syra through the tangled, neon-lit maze of Pharos IX's Undercity, his pace quick but controlled. He was a man used to running, but Syra could see the tension in his shoulders. He was calculating. The bounty hunters had lost their immediate trail, but they both knew it wouldn't last. She winced as pain flared through her side. The wound was getting worse. She needed medical attention, but there was no time to stop. Ethan glanced at her, his expression unreadable. "You still with me, princess?" Syra forced herself to nod. "Don't call me that." Ethan smirked. "Sure thing, Your Highness." She shot him a glare, but before she could respond, Ethan raised a hand, signaling her to stop. They had reached a run-down warehouse, its metal doors rusted from years of abandonment. Ethan knocked twice, then pressed his palm against a hidden scanner. The door hissed open. A friend or an enemy? Inside, the air smelled of fuel, grease, and old technology. Half-disassembled ships and stolen cargo cluttered the space. The walls were lined with illicit weaponry and black-market cybernetic parts. A short, wiry alien sat hunched over a workbench, welding a mechanical arm onto a half-conscious cyborg mercenary. Ethan cleared his throat. "Hope I'm not interrupting something, Keth." The alien turned, his four mechanical eyes blinking in rapid succession. He let out a scratchy laugh. "Ethan Voss. Back from the dead again, I see." And with his gaze landed on Syra. "That's a big bounty walking into my shop." Syra tensed, but Ethan stepped in front of her, his hand casually resting on his blaster. "She's not for sale." Keth clicked his tongue. "That's a shame. That bounty could buy me a whole fleet." "You still owe me," Ethan reminded him. The alien sighed, rubbing one of his mechanical eyes. "Fine. What do you need?" Ethan crossed his arms. "A ship. Something fast. No trackers." Keth laughed again. "You really think I just have a clean ship lying around? The kind of trouble you're in, Voss, you'll need more than just a ride." Syra's secret. Syra leaned against the wall, watching the exchange. Ethan had pulled her out of the fire, but he still didn't know the full story. She sighed. It was time. "The bounty on me isn't about money," she said suddenly. Ethan and Keth both turned to her. "The people hunting me don't just want me captured. They want me dead." Ethan narrowed his eyes. "Yeah, I got that much." Syra shook her head. "No, you don't understand. If I die, my entire bloodline dies with me. The Empire falls into the hands of the ones who murdered my father." Ethan's expression hardened. "You're saying this isn't just some power struggle?" Syra exhaled. "The ones hunting me, they aren't just politicians or generals. They're not even fully organic anymore. They call themselves the Echelon. They've been replacing key members of the Empire's leadership with enhanced cybernetic versions of themselves. My father was one of the last true rulers left." Ethan frowned. "Cybernetic replacements. That's some dystopian nightmare stuff." Syra nodded. "And it's already happening. If I don't stop them, the Empire becomes a machine-run dictatorship. No free will, no future." Ethan ran a hand through his hair. "Great, so now I'm not just helping a fugitive. I'm tangled up in a galactic coup." Keth let out a low whistle. "Well, now I really can't sell you out. Sounds like things are about to get interesting." Tracked again. A sudden beeping cut through the tension. Keth's security systems blared, red warning lights flickering across the room. A holographic display blinked to life, showing a fleet of small, unmanned drones swarming outside the warehouse. Syra's stomach dropped. "They found us." Ethan drew his blaster, already scanning for an exit. "How?" "We lost them." Keth frowned, pulling up another display. Not bounty hunters this time. This is military tech. High-end surveillance units. Someone with serious resources just locked onto you. Zara clenched her fists. Echelon. The warehouse shook as the first drone attack hit, blasting through the front doors. The sound of metal boots hitting the ground echoed through the air. Ethan grabbed Sarah's arm, his expression serious. Time to move, princess. She didn't argue. Keth hit a switch, and a hidden hatch slid open beneath a stack of crates. Take the underground tunnels. Leads to the old scrapyard. You'll find a ship there. Ethan gave him a nod. You better be gone by the time they get here. Keth grinned, grabbing a massive plasma rifle from the wall. Oh, don't worry about me. I love a good shootout. Sarah took one last look at him before following Ethan into the tunnels. As the hatch slammed shut above them, the sounds of battle erupted behind them. The underground passage was dark, damp, and smelled like rust. Ethan led the way, his weapon drawn. Let's hope your empire has a plan, because I think we just pissed off the wrong people. Zyra's eyes narrowed. We didn't just piss them off. We just declared war. The ultimate escape plan. The underground tunnels stretched deep beneath Pharaoh's 9, winding like veins through the decayed Undercity. The air was thick with rust and moisture, the walls lined with old power cables and forgotten maintenance panels. Zyra's boots splashed against stagnant puddles as she followed Ethan through the dimly lit passage. The distant booms of explosions above told them that Keth was buying them time, but not much. Ethan moved with calculated urgency, his blaster drawn, scanning every shadow. He had been in places like this before. He knew the rules. Keep moving. Trust nothing. Expect betrayal. Zyra tightened her grip on a stolen plasma dagger. Her wound throbbed, but she ignored it. Pain was a luxury she couldn't afford. How much farther? She asked, her voice steady despite the exhaustion in her limbs. Ethan didn't glance back. Not far. There's an old scrapyard at the end of this tunnel. If Keth's info is good, there's a ship waiting for us. Zyra exhaled. And if it's not? Ethan smirked. Then we improvise. I'm good at that. Ahead, the tunnel split into two paths. Ethan barely hesitated before choosing the left one. But as they stepped forward, a sharp beeping sound echoed from above. Zyra froze. Ethan. The trap was already sprung. Ambush in the tunnels. From the darkness above, 3 metallic sentry drones dropped down, their gun barrels glowing red-hot. They had been waiting. A hollow mechanical voice filled the tunnel. Target acquired. Termination protocol initiated. Blaster fire rained down instantly. Ethan grabbed Sarah's wrist and yanked her sideways, diving behind a rusted support beam as plasma bolts scorched the walls. Sparks flew. The tunnel shook with each impact. They had the tunnels watched. Zyra shouted, gripping her dagger. Ethan gritted his teeth. Looks like Echelon doesn't take chances. The drones hovered forward, scanning the area with precision. Zyra knew these machines. Imperial assassination units, programmed for one thing: eliminating targets with brutal efficiency. Ethan fired first, his shot striking one of the drones dead center. The machine twisted in midair, its circuits overloading before it crashed in a smoking heap. The other 2 adjusted instantly, focusing fire on their location. Zyra's instincts kicked in. She didn't have a gun, but she had speed. She darted forward, dodging between support beams as energy blasts sizzled past her. The closest drone pivoted to track her, but she was already beneath it. One precise slash. Her dagger pierced the drone's underside, slicing through delicate wiring. The machine sputtered violently before collapsing in a heap of sparks. Ethan took out the last one with a well-placed headshot, its frame crumpling into the muck below. Silence. Zara caught her breath, resting a hand against the damp wall. That was close. Ethan smirked. What? Don't like being shot at? Zyra scowled. Not particularly. Ethan chuckled, but his expression quickly turned serious. We need to move. Now, if they found us here, they'll have more waiting at the ship. Thyra nodded. Then let's make this fast. The scrapyard and the betrayal. They emerged from the tunnels into a vast, abandoned scrapyard. Mountains of broken ships and twisted metal stretched into the horizon, bathed in the cold blue glow of Veros 9's artificial moonlight. And there it was. A small, sleek starship sat in the center of the yard, its hull covered in rust and plasma burns. It wasn't pretty, but it would fly. Ethan exhaled. Keth actually came through. I'm shocked. Thyra wasn't convinced. Something's wrong. Her instincts had been honed through years of training. This was too easy. Ethan strode toward the ship, keeping one hand near his blaster. If this thing runs, we're off this rock in. A gunshot rang out. Ethan froze. Thyra's eyes darted toward a figure emerging from the shadows. A tall, armored bounty hunter stepped into view, a long-range rifle still smoking in his hands. Thyra's stomach twisted in dread. She knew that armor. Darius. The bounty hunter's helmeted gaze locked onto her. Princess, he said coldly. I was starting to think you wouldn't make it this far. Ethan's expression darkened. Friend of yours. Sarah clenched her fists. Used to be. Darius took a slow step forward. I gave you a chance to surrender. You ran. You forced my hand. Ethan scoffed. She forced your hand. Seems to me like you enjoy hunting your own people. Darius's visor glowed red. It's not personal, human. It's duty. Zira shook her head. No, it's loyalty to the wrong side. Darius raised his rifle. I won't let you leave this planet alive. Ethan sighed. You guys always say that. Then he drew his blaster and fired. The showdown. Darius was fast. He dodged Ethan's first shot, rolling to the side and returning fire. Thyra dove behind cover, her heart racing. Ethan and Darius traded shots, their blaster bolts illuminating the scrapyard in bursts of red and blue energy. Sparks rained down as plasma fire ripped through metal and debris. Thyra knew Ethan was good, but Darius had been one of the Empire's elite soldiers before he turned bounty hunter. He wouldn't go down easily. Zira gritted her teeth. She couldn't just sit back and watch. She had to end this. While Ethan kept Darius distracted, Thyra sprinted low across the wreckage, weaving between metal scraps and discarded parts. Closer, closer. She could see the weak spot in Darius's armor plating, a gap near the base of his spine. This was her only shot. With one final burst of speed, she lunged forward, driving her plasma dagger deep into the weak point. Darius stiffened, his body jerking as the energy blade sliced through his exosuit circuits. He turned, his helmet tilting toward her, almost in disbelief. You. Then he collapsed. Thyra stood over him, breathing hard. The fight was over. Ethan dusted himself off. Remind me never to get on your bad side. Thyra flicked the blood from her blade. Then don't betray me. Ethan chuckled. Noted. Now let's get the hell out of here. As they boarded the stolen ship, engines roaring to life, Thyra stared out the cockpit window. She wasn't just running anymore. She was coming back for her empire. The final stand and escape. The stolen starship roared to life, its ancient engines groaning as they powered up. The cockpit trembled under Thyra's hands as she activated the controls. Dust and debris swirled outside as the thrusters hummed, pushing energy into the launch sequence. Ethan sat in the pilot's seat, flipping switches like a man who had done this 1,000 times. All right, princess, let's hope this junker still flies. Thyra's violet eyes scanned the ship's sensors. We don't have a choice. Outside, the scrapyard erupted with movement. Thrones, soldiers, more bounty hunters. The explosion of Darius's defeat had drawn every hunter left on Veros 9 straight to them. A harsh peeping filled the cockpit. Thyra's stomach dropped as she read the display. Ethan, she started, her voice tight. There's a blockade in orbit. Ethan exhaled sharply. Of course there is. Wouldn't be fun if there wasn't. Zera gripped the controls. They're waiting for us to launch. Waiting to kill us. Ethan cracked his knuckles and grinned. Well then, let's make them earn it. The ship's engines ignited, sending a shockwave through the scrapyard as they lifted off. And all hell broke loose. Breaking the trap. Blaster fire rained down from the sky. Red-hot energy bolts slicing through the night as bounty hunters and soldiers opened fire on the rising ship. Zera fought the controls, her arms burning with effort as she kept the vessel steady, dodging incoming rockets. Ethan swung the ship hard to the right, skimming dangerously close to the scrapyard towers. They weren't kidding about that bounty, he muttered. Zera's fingers flew across the controls, activating the defensive turrets. Hold them off. Ethan slammed his fist against the weapons panel. Twin plasma cannons on the ship's underbelly roared to life, shredding through the enemy ranks below. The ground lit up as explosions tore apart metal and bodies alike. The bounty hunters scattered, some diving for cover, others turning and running. The ship surged upward, breaking free of the battlefield. But they weren't safe yet. The orbital blockade. As soon as they hit open sky, Zera saw them. A fleet of black, angular warships floating in the upper atmosphere. Echelon's forces. The main dreadnought sat in the center, its cannons already aimed at them. A transmission came through the ship's comms, cold and lifeless. Fugitive Kyra, you will not leave this system. Power down immediately, or be destroyed. Zera's jaw clenched. Like hell I will. Ethan laughed dryly, his hands gripping the controls. You got a plan, or are we just making this up as we go? She met his gaze. Little bit of both. Ethan grinned. That's my favorite kind. Zera's eyes flicked to the scanner display. The blockade was too strong. Their weapons weren't enough to fight back. But there was another way. The impossible escape. Tyra's fingers flew across the ship's navigation system. A calculated risk. A death wish. She turned to Ethan. See that nebula off to the left. He squinted at the purple and blue storm of crackling energy in the distance. Yeah, what about it? We're going in. Ethan's expression froze. That's a lightning storm, a plasma-fueled death trap. You're insane. Zera's violet eyes burned with defiance. Do you trust me? Ethan hesitated. Then with a slow grin, he punched the throttle forward. Guess we're both insane. The ship lurched forward, engines roaring as they accelerated straight for the nebula. Behind them, the Echelon fleet gave chase. Fighters swarmed like hornets, lasers scorching the space around them. The dreadnought charged its main cannon, preparing a planet-cracking shot. They were seconds from being obliterated. Zera held her breath. Then, the ship pierced the nebula's outer rim, vanishing into the chaotic electric storm. The storm gamble. Inside the nebula, everything turned to madness. Energy currents lashed against the ship's shields, sending sparks flying across the cockpit. The gravity field warped, making it nearly impossible to steer. Ethan fought the controls, gritting his teeth. This was a terrible plan. Zera scanned the readings, her mind working fast. The electromagnetic storms should scramble their tracking systems. Outside, lightning crashed through space, the Echelon fighters struggling to follow them. One by one, the enemy ships lost control, their systems overloaded by the storm's interference. Some spiraled out of control, others vanished in massive electrical explosions. The dreadnought fired a blind shot into the nebula, but it missed completely, its sensors unable to lock onto them. The ship shook violently, but they were still alive. Zera exhaled, hands trembling from adrenaline. They had done it. Victory and a new mission. Minutes later, they broke through the other side of the nebula, emerging into open space. Free. Ethan leaned back in his seat, breathing hard. I can't believe that worked. Zyra's heartbeat finally slowed, but her expression remained hard. We survived. But this isn't over. Ethan gave her a curious look. You got a plan for what's next? Zyra's gaze darkened. I can't run forever. If I want to take back my empire, I need allies. She turned to him. And I need you. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Me? You sure about that, princess? Zyra smirked for the first time. You're reckless, unpredictable, impossible to control. Her expression turned serious, and exactly the kind of man I need. Ethan chuckled. Well, when you put it like that. He pushed the throttle, sending the ship speeding toward the stars. Let's go start a revolution.